Okay, so I live by the beach, as you can see. It's not the nicest day out, but like most beach goers, I like to play volleyball. And where I play volleyball at, there's 2 nets. And this area has been a lot of tourists that want to play volleyball lately, and you have the locals that live here as well. And there's been a lot of conflict lately that I've seen. These are actually nets that I don't play on too much, but it's like in a very public area. I try to avoid it, but anyway, sometimes I play volleyball there. And I see that there's a lot of conflict between the locals wanting to play on the nets and the tourists wanting to play on the nets. And recently I actually saw that one of the nets was taken down. And so who took them down? Well, my bet is that it was a bunch of angry locals who were mad that they couldn't play on the nets because there are too many tourists there. And so now there's only 1 net, and people are going to be fighting over that net even more. Now this makes no sense, right? Why would they do this? Well, this reveals something very deep about human nature and how people interact with one another. And something that's really important to think about is how societies interact with one another. It can help you understand why people get resentful, why people hurt themselves at the expense of others. And well, I'm going to explain all that in this video, okay? So the best way to explain this is actually through a experiment, a collection of studies. It's very fascinating. It's called the public goods experiment. So the way that it worked is you have a group of 4 people, and this is an experiment you could play with your friends if you want, just to see what happens. But there's a group of 4 people, and each person is given $10 in $1 bill increments. So each person is able to put in $1 into the pot in each round. And every time you put $1 in, however much the pot is that round, everybody gets that amount. So let's say that 2 people put $1 in 1 round, then everybody gets $2. And the other 2 who didn't put any money in, even though they didn't put any money in, they get $2 back. Pretty cool. So you can probably already see how this experiment can go wrong. So what happened, or what can happen, is some very smart people, who are pretty selfish, I should say, they can do this experiment so that everybody else keeps putting in $1. So let's say like 3 out of the 4 people are putting in $1 each time. They each get $3 back. But one person who's not doing it, he doesn't have to contribute anything, and he still gets their money, right? So he still gets to split the pot afterwards. And well, I'm curious to hear like what you guys probably think happened as a result of that. But this is basically what ended up happening, is that eventually there's almost always like one person that thinks, oh, well, I don't have to contribute anything. I can just collect the money from the middle without investing anything myself. So typically what happened is some people are contributing at first, others aren't. And then eventually the ones that are contributing get pissed off, and then they stop contributing themselves. And then eventually nobody's contributing to the pot anymore. And those people get pissed off because they're contributing to the pot where these other guys are just freeloaders, right? Now, here's where the experiment gets interesting. They put in a stipulation, these researchers, they put in a stipulation where they said, okay, well, what you can do is instead of contributing your $1 to the pot, another thing you can do is you can take that $1 and punish somebody else in the group $3. So let's say that in a group of 4, everybody's cooperating except for that one person that's being a freeloader. Well, instead of putting your money in for you to get $2 back, you can actually put your money in to make that person lose $3. And the experiment completely changed when people started doing that. Because here's the thing. Okay, if you use that strategy, overall, you're probably going to end up losing more money. Or you're not going to win as much as if you just contributed to the pot and then got back your initial investment plus whatever earned throughout that round. But what happened is a lot of these people, as soon as they started to see a freeloader, they started using that $1 to punish that person. And so the experiments came up with 3 different categorizations of these types of people, where they call the selfish people the knaves. I don't know why. I don't even know what that word means. There's actually another categorization of people they called the saints. And the saints were people who just contributed to the pot every time. And they really believed in the group and everything, no matter if there was somebody sabotaging the game. And the third group was the moralists, the people who were willing to sacrifice the dollar in order to punish people who weren't cooperating, so that they would lose $3. Now, guess which group had the most people in it, percentage-wise? It's not the saints, not even knaves, it was the moralists. It's about 60% of people would take on that role. And so, let's talk about the volleyball net. All right, well, rationally, why the hell would you take down a net? I mean, there's only 2 nets just because you're mad that there is a conflict there with tourists sometimes. It's because most people have that moralist mindset. It's not about the rational choice of, or the rational way of thinking of, well, there's 2 volleyball nets, and therefore we have more of a chance to play because there's 2 nets. No, you guys are being unfair, and if we can't play, then you can't play. And even if me punishing you makes it even tougher for me to play, I'm still gonna do it anyway. It's the same exact thing that got repeated in the public goods experiment. And, well, this is where Nietzsche comes in. Take a shot for every time I say that. It basically happens in every single video. So the idea of punishment is something that is very, very interesting to Nietzsche. Because he even thinks, for example, that our ability to form memories, the reason we form memories is because we need to remember if we don't do X, Y, Z, we're going to get punished. And it's pretty cool when you see how ahead of his time he was, because you look at things like the public goods experiment, and it just proves Nietzsche exactly right. That, okay, so let me rewind a bit. There's one thing, sort of this assumption that sociologists and just scientists in general have had, that started with Darwin, that says that human beings are naturally selfish. They're going to do whatever it takes to, they're naturally self-interested, I should say. They're going to do whatever it takes to just move themselves forward and preserve themselves, right? Richard Dawkins, the selfish gene. You just have all these selfish genes that just want to copy themselves selfishly, right? And this isn't necessarily completely untrue. However, what Nietzsche believed is that the will to power was more of a driving instinct than the will to self-preservation. That people are willing to sacrifice themselves for a greater idea, for a greater good. And you can look at the public goods experiment in 2 different ways of people are just irrationally driven by hatred, envy, and resentment, and therefore they're willing to punish themselves as long as they can punish somebody else even more severely. Or you could look at it in another way and say that people naturally want to be in groups. They want to naturally have group morale. They want to naturally have the group or society or squad or whatever they're part of succeed. And they're willing to lay down their own personal self-interests in order to have that group succeed. And that's kind of actually more in a will to power framework of being willing to sacrifice yourself for something greater. Because at the expense of yourself, right? Something that trumps the self-preservative instinct. And so most things, I think it's a mix of both things. But when you look to your own life and you see okay, why are people doing these absurd, stupid things that are completely irrational, where they're hurting themselves just as much as they're hurting others. Again, it could be in your personal life, it can be in relationships, it can be in politics. It's like, why the hell are they doing that? It's because the human nature element of it, of wanting to punish people who don't follow the rules, it's very central to who we are. And this public goods experiment is very interesting because they actually used this experiment on different cultures, and they got mixed results, although most of it ended up being pretty similar, where eventually, if you just have one or two selfish people in the group, eventually the moralists would always try to punish the knaves eventually. So yeah, I just think this is a really interesting thing. And when I saw that volleyball net, it just reminded me of what I read. I read this from a book called War and Peace and War by Peter Turchin. It's fantastic. I'm just getting into Peter Turchin's work. He basically has sort of like, he's basically a historian, but he takes, the claim that he's making in that book is that all human civilizations, all empires, I should say, because the subtitle of the book is the rise and why empires rise and fall and rise again. His claim is that successful empires always start on a frontier, meaning that there's like a border that differentiates between their people and other people. And the conflict between them and the other people is what helps solidify group identity. And then they're able to expand out their empire from there. It's really fascinating. And that goes in line with Nietzschean thought as well, of the fact that people are able to have, or naturally, if you have an other to compare yourself against, to compete against, that makes you stronger, right? So, yeah, just a cool video, or a cool topic I wanted to talk about. Sometimes I just turn the camera on and talk about whatever's on my mind. I was thinking about this topic for a few days because it's kind of tough to explain, because I just came across it myself. I haven't had a whole bunch of time to think about it. But I'm going to rewatch this video, and if it didn't turn out the way I want, I'll probably refilm it. But let me know what you think in the comment section below about the public goods experiment. And do you think that it really reveals something deep about human nature? And if there's something that you think I missed, or some sort of insight that I might have missed. Thanks so much for watching as always, and I'll see you in the next video. Goodbye.